Hi, guys, and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, this is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us. I'm so happy he was able to join us. Tom Bitondo, who is an amazing musician. He happens to be teaching my son for the last, 7 years or so, I think, Tom?
I think so. It's been a while, yeah.
He's joining us with his creative ways of looking at the world and his extremely talented self. Tom, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind compliments. Appreciate that.
You're the best. You're the best.
Oh, flattery will get you everywhere.
So, Tom, let's just start out with your background. How did you get into a music career, and, where did you learn how to play? I know you're passionate about your work. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I started out, I guess I was about 6.5 years old, and I had asthma as a child. The doctor said, it's good if he takes up a musical instrument. So being Italian, living in the Bronx, you play the accordion. Yeah. So they rented an accordion for me. My parents rented an accordion. I took lessons, I guess, for about 6-7 months. And I said, I want to quit. So I quit for a couple of months. And then miraculously, my father came home one night with his friend Eddie, and he had a beautiful 120 bass mother of pearl white accordion. And I said, wow, Dad, where did you get that? What do you think he said? It fell off a truck.
No. Yes. Oh my God.
So I said, really? He said, yeah, it fell off a truck. I said, did you find the guy that dropped it? He said, no. I said, oh, okay, well, I'd love that. I would, right? I said that I would love to own that accordion. He said, well, if you want it, you have to go back to studying again.
Wow.
So I'm hemming and hawing. And I said, I looked at you. I said, okay, all right, I'll do it. So I ended up getting a private teacher then that came to the house. I had to go into a music school. I enjoyed the accordion. It's funny. This is before I ever had touched a piano or organ.
Yeah.
The accordion was nice because I would take it outside, play for my friends, or I'd take it to my grandmother's house. And well, typically I would come home from school. I went to Catholic school. So I come home from school, and the typical day would be, the first thing would be the uniform jacket and the shirt would go on the dog, and I would chase the dog around and get yelled at. And then I would take the accordion out and put on the TV, and I didn't realize I was training my ear. I would maybe play along to some of the theme songs like Green Acres or I Dream of Jeannie, funny. One of those shows, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, or like, a cartoon, something like that.
Yeah.
And and I trained my ear that way. I didn't realize. Then I would throw the accordion down, fling it down, put on my pants, go outside and play football or stickball or whatever we did. So it was always a recreational thing for me.
How did you segue into the key?
Well, so what happened was, as I got older, little older, you start watching TV. There was Don Kirshner's rock concert on TV and all these shows. And you see these guys playing in a band, but they're playing something flat, like a keyboard or a organ. And I said, and they were like good looking dudes, and you could see girls. And I said, gee, the formula for getting girls.
Oh, yes.
It couldn't be easier if I become a rock star. I mean, that's a clear cut. That's
that's right.
The career path. So I wanted to learn organ and play in a band. So organ was a very expensive instrument, very big, unwieldy instrument. At the time, we were still living in an apartment. But I, begged and pleaded. And my grandmother, who was very kind to me, gave me money towards it. And because she used to love to sing, she would come over and she would sing all the Italian songs. So it's kind of like she loved helping me out. She helped me. My father helped me. And boom, ended up with an organ and started studying Baroque and classical music on that. And then eventually got a piano. When we moved to a bigger place. We actually built a house then and had room for a piano. And I studied all the different styles of music. I studied jazz piano with some named jazz pianists. I'm not a name dropper, but I don't do that. But some people who were pretty famous,
Wow.
classical musicians that were really high end, classical organist that was unbelievable, well known. And so I took a little bit from each and put it all together, and really loved playing. I was involved with bands and involved with all kinds of shows and things. I would say, well, when Rebecca was born, my daughter, she's 28 now, so about 28 years ago, I had started to be, it's funny, like a baby comes to the house and, things like your life is starting to change. And I was feeling a little stagnant too. I was playing in one or two bands at the time, but I said, I think I want to try to switch instruments or supplement, like when people cross train in sports.
Sure.
So I started studying saxophone.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I haven't played in a while, but at the time I was playing saxophone every day, practicing. We were living in an apartment, but we had very tolerant landlord downstairs, that would put up with me playing.
Yeah.
And if for the really loud tones, I would actually take the saxophone and play it into a closet to suppress the sound. Yeah. So necessity is the mother of invention. You do what you got to do.
Right, that's right.
But I learned saxophone from a really great saxophone player, and also trained myself on my own. I studied, the flute that the kids play, the recorder, the little plastic things. Mm-hmm. It's actually a serious instrument. It's a Baroque or Renaissance, actually. It's from the Renaissance and the Baroque period, a classical instrument. And it's very difficult to play well, but it's a very expressive, interesting, portable instrument. I always have one in the car or in a bag or something. Yeah, it's a cool little thing to have. So I started studying that on my own. Plus I was studying saxophone, plus still playing piano and gigging. I really wanted to learn the linear instruments, the woodwind instruments, because the sense of melody, when you play a piano, if you listen, the sound goes like this. And now it starts to die out, right? Mm. So to really get a smooth legato sound, say like you have to really have the concept of like a wind player or a singer would have, in that it's a smooth legato continuous line. Mm. So I wanted that, was especially playing synthesizers. Sometimes when you play a show or small show, you're not playing piano. The music director is doing the piano part, but maybe you're assigned to play on a synthesizer like woodwind parts or brass parts. And I wanted to get a good feel for that. And I was interested. I've always been very inquisitive and interesting. So I studied those two for quite a while, and they kind of supplemented what I do on the keyboard. And then, I want to say my mid to late 20s, I started coaching people who wanted to learn how to play, because by then I pretty much knew what I was doing on stuff. Right. And so I had started my teaching thing, and I started formally teaching, like in a sense where I was getting students, maybe my early 30s. I started then taking on actual students.
You're amazing, because I had no idea that you had such a comprehensive background in so many different instruments.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that just helps for any musician.
It's like cross-training in sports. I mean, when I was young, I used to do weightlifting. Then for a while, I was doing martial arts. But again, it was all to cross-train and go back and forth, because I believe that if you do just one thing, you get kind of too used to it. And then you start patting yourself on the back and saying, wow, I'm great at this. You have to keep pushing the envelope. Any classical music that I practice, I don't get a chance to practice much these days. I'm always teaching, right? Or preparing for a gig. Or like I'm in a couple of bands now. All we do is we rehearse with the hopes that there's going to be work. So I'm always busy. Right. But anytime I play classical music at home to practice anything, it's always stuff that's way beyond my ability. I just don't sit there. I don't sit there and go, okay, and say, okay, well, I just played a piece by Bach. I feel accomplished. No, I could do that already. I sit down with really thick, intense stuff, and I try to get into the mindset of the composer. I hate the term picking someone's brain, because to me that's negative, but in a positive sense, I like to get into the mindset of what a composer, like say, I'm really into Bela Bartok now. I like his music. And Bartok was Hungarian. He actually, I believe in an interview, said he was reborn when he was 18 years old, when he heard a young woman singing a folk song, because he liked a lot of the Hungarian folk songs. And the rhythms in that music are, the folk rhythms are very like, it's not like a dance beat. Like they might have something like something like that, right?
Cool.
And he really loved that. And he latched on to that idea of taking the folk music and turning it into classical music. So I started studying his music just on my own. And it's difficult to play because it doesn't sound or feel mainstream. But I will, torture myself with stuff like that, or, progressive rock like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, bands like that, that have the really fast, and lines moving where one hand may be doing like this constantly, and then the other hand is doing, at the same time.
Two totally different things. Yeah.
Two totally different things. I like things that are challenging. I don't really feel like, now it's different. If, sometimes everybody always has a birthday. So I'm always conned into,
well,
doing stuff that
we conned you into doing some musical tunes for us a few years ago.
I think I remember that. But you want to know something? I love doing that because that's when I get a chance to play for people that I really love.
Right.
It's pleasurable. But
fun.
What I'm saying is, so I'm willing to do that, ready, willing, and able to always go play for somebody and have a good time all night. But for myself, it has to push the envelope to the point where I get a headache after 10 minutes and go, at 62, do I want to do this anymore? To torture myself. But then I say, yeah, I do, because the reason why I'm doing it, and I'm not just sitting on a couch like watching TV, is because this is what I do. So,
exactly. And it speaks to your soul. I mean, this is who you are. One of the things I took from your style of teaching is that you are what you teach.
Right.
And you embodying so much of what this passion is of yours, and how all the different ways you can see within the music. It's the story that any student needs, because then they go inside it. It's not just, okay, these are my notes and these are my fingers. You know what I mean?
You see, it's the pride that people get from doing this that keeps them going. And it's a personal one-on-one pride between you and the music, or you and the canvas, or you and the paper. If you're writing poetry, whatever you're doing, you can't put a price on the fact that if it makes it, you made it. And if it doesn't make it, you take all the responsibility. So it's a real personal pride type of thing.
Yes. Because I believe everyone can learn things. Even with art, when I was teaching, I felt like, you know what, if this was a subject matter that was taken seriously in school, and this was like one of the grades that mattered, everyone would be able to learn how to draw, because that would just be part of it.
It's also the lack of respect, I think, that art gets compared to like a sports program. And I believe it's because, and it's only because people want their kids to do lacrosse, or they want them to do football. Well, somewhat for sportsmanship, but also they say, if you do really well on the varsity team, you're a shoo-in to get into Penn State. And everybody goes, oh yeah. So so it becomes like almost like important. And if a school has a great sports team, and I'm not taking anything away from that, because I think sports themselves itself is a great thing to have people on a team for teamwork, and it's good. But I think that, what about the kid that is not playing football but needs an outlet, needs a sense of expression?
Exactly.
You can't stop them,
it's this thing. Well, in general, I mean, look what's pushed most in the schools. It's math and science, which is great for those kids who excel in those areas. And then the arts in general, they're so life affirming, and this isn't a value, I think, that we have in our society.
No, what I don't understand is they teach all this really cryptic and high level math, and I understand where it's good for critical thinking and to develop your sense of logic and reasoning, but at the same time, you have to teach kids, like in the old days, what it means to finance a car, what it means to have a mortgage, what it means to put money in a bank, to save, what is interest, stupid basic things like that. And instead you're producing people that can solve the highest algebra highest trigonometry equations, calculus equations, but they can't but they'll get destroyed by a credit card because they don't understand what interest, something like that is. I just think that it's out of balance in what the priorities are in the school system. That's my opinion. And again, I think it's because it's like a race. They want to be all competitive.
That's always the thing. And it's not really about fulfilling a personal need or, drive or passion or talent.
Right.
And, I mean, we're art and music. So I always look at it as there's certain interesting life skills that you could learn very well if you started out, say, a problem and a creative problem in the classroom and said, well, this is what you have to solve and these are your resources, or this is what
Yeah.
you have. And, you come up with something. And I think, interestingly, this is a action that was taking place over the course of the pandemic because everyone was home and they're like, oh
Mhm.
gosh, like I have to now do something, everyone was starting to get creative and they started seeing like, wow, this is like a great thing to add to my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Now, it
Yeah.
was only because they were forced into it. But,
Right.
for us, I felt fine with the pandemic because I was like, okay, let me get out my brushes. You know what I mean?
Well, I didn't do anything different. The only thing I did was I put the phone on top of the piano and I phoned everybody and I said, I'm still teaching. If you're interested, we could do it this way. We could try it. And it worked out well.
How did you adjust to the pandemic in that way? I know, yes, you had a lot of students then, take care of that, and Jack did that too. Did you like that?
There's nothing that can supplement one-on-one, because when you're one-on-one, there's that certain vibe and that certain warmth that you can give to a person and,
Right.
and encouragement in a personal way. But I think it's worse for them to miss out on studying because then they start to lose momentum. They could possibly get
Sure.
discouraged. And the thing is that when they play, they think that I need to see their fingers. I don't need to see their fingers. I only need to hear it. So if a guy plays something and he goes, and instead he goes like that, I just hear it and I go, stop. You played enough sharp with your thumb. You have to play the G with your thumb. Because
Wow.
I'll even hear if the notes before was strong like that. Like I'll even know if the fingering was correct because I'm doing it for so long. So
Yeah.
for me, it was kind of like I didn't have to see them, but I would still position the phone so they could see my fingers just in
Yes.
case they had a question. And it was very minimal. Most of the time it was a discussion. Like I'd say, okay, go down to that next system, go 2 measures over, and on that B flat, try to play it a little lighter, like that. Just something like that.
Now, was it easier to do it with kids or adults that had a little bit more background? Like Jack was a little further along, so he liked it because he would hear you and then he would do it. But like I remember when he started, he needed a little bit more of that.
It is easier, a little easier, but not much. But what it is see, for me, to talk excessively is more painful. Well, like when I'm in the lesson and I could show them and talk a little bit, that's easier. When I had to talk for like, say, it's like some of the kids that were just, I had to tell them every single thing. Like I'd have to say, okay, put your fourth finger here, do this,
Right.
no, do this instead. The constant talking, because remember a few years ago I had cancer, and so
Yes.
when they did all that, one thing they did was they disrupted my voice box. So now my voice starts to hurt after a while when I talk. And so it's like for that, but when it's like a heightened thing, like if I'm just talking casual like this, it's one thing, but to have to keep explaining something to someone, it would get a little where I'd say, oh, it's like, it's a lot of talking. Like it's
Yeah.
easier to just be next to them and just say, no, do this instead of that. But I got
Right.
through it. I mean, I'm not complaining. I got through it just like everything else.
Are you doing classes again? I mean, one-on-ones
Oh,
again,
in person. Yeah.
Oh, good.
All in person. Yeah. All in person.
Nice.
Except for someone like if Jack wants to do the Zoom, we could still do that. Or if he wants in person but whatever. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I wear a mask. They wear a mask.
Right.
I've had COVID. I'm not afraid. I'll have my second shot soon. I'm like Superman now, I'm like, bring it on now, I'm not worried.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
You're
it's all good.
funny.
I try.
Do you believe anyone and everyone could and should learn an instrument?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. Music at the very outset starts out typically as enrichment to somebody, correct?
Mhm.
So you have a young child or an adult and they want to be musically, quote unquote, enriched. So on that level, I think that anybody can be taught something at the piano. There's a lot of factors, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But what I'd like to do is differentiate that between, well, say you take like a person who wants to be a concert pianist, somebody that wants to play with famous orchestras, big concert halls throughout the world, that type of thing. That type of situation typically starts out when somebody's very, very young. From young, but they're educated in such a way, and it's not only the musical education, it's also unfortunately socializing, social connections, this and that, the other thing. It really has to do with coming from a family that, if they don't have money, have at least substantial connections in the arts world, which with the music arts world, which in itself is very political, just like any other type of art. And the people who become, say, we're talking now a concert person, right?
Right.
Not only do they have to have a tremendous amount of discipline and support system. I mean, you can't be poor and do that typically, or come from a family that's broken and everybody's fighting and this and that. You have to have the right support system. And you're basically, when you're done with your education and you're performing in that sense, you're like a greyhound or a racehorse. You do one thing and you do it really great.
Right.
That type of thing is mostly unobtainable for most people because they don't have the one of the two things. If they have great ability and talent, they may not socialize in the right circles. If they socialize and they're great and the father knows the president of Carnegie Hall and all that, the guy still may be like, just not talented to play, right? So having that type of thing, I'd say most people aren't suited for that. Now, in terms of playing pop music, playing even serious jazz, stuff like that, everybody has the capacity to learn something. But it has to do with if you want to do this for a living, you have to have, again, the time and the gumption to sit there and practice to the level where you could perform this and that and really pull it off correctly. Whereas if somebody's aspirations are just to be able to play light tunes, that's fine. So anybody can do this based on a non-concert level. Just about anybody could do it, I think.
Right. What I find with art too, I noticed this. I think the level that I see as an accomplishment in art is somebody who actually applies their heart to the project.
Yeah.
So rather than just say, okay, let me do something quick and, oh, look, it's an abstract. Abstract work takes a long time. I don't do abstract well. It's very, very complicated, to communicate that. I mean, we know, like Jackson Pollock.
Right. To get it to make sense to you, it has to make sense to you first before you could make sense of it to somebody else. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly.
I get that.
But, I think a lot of the kids who I did have in classes, when I did teach a couple art classes, I was mostly an English teacher. But the few art classes I did teach and I watched the students, what I found is, you know what? There's such a wide variety of creativity that I think, if anything, we're bottling them up and putting them in categories and say, well, you can do this and you can't do this. And
Exactly.
So I feel like many people don't have confidence to even try.
Yeah, no. And the thing is that you have to look at it as if you want to be a certain type of artist, be it painting, visual arts like that, or words, poetry or books or whatever, or music, you have to just make the commitment that this is what you do, this is what you're doing, and enjoy all the bumps in the road along the way. And don't be swayed. If somebody tells you, man, that's amazing, take it as, well, I guess it sounded nice. If somebody tells you, oh, that really sucks, say, well, I guess they didn't think it sounded so nice. But either way, don't take super positive or super negative criticism as anything more than just someone's opinion. Opinions. I don't want to say what opinions are like, but this is probably censored, but
Well, you know what? Opinions are huge because it is artistic people in general. They tend to get a little sensitive by things. I know I do, but it's true when you remove your personal ego from it, you get much more out of it because it's really just about you connecting with that, I guess, energy that flows through you.
Well, the thing too is, like, if you look at music, for example, the early music was very, very structured. So to give you, actually, since I'm at the piano, to give you an example, everything had a very smooth sound, like, say, right? That's like a typical smooth voice leading classical harmony, right?
Mm.
And they were doing that. They didn't, a lot of this was based on vocal arrangements, voices that they didn't want voices to jump around. That's why it's called voice leading. And then it translated out to the notes being played smoothly, just in a very general sense, right? But what happened was somebody like Bach came along, and Bach was like the Beatles in a sense. He was, he was like the pinnacle of his genre. And he would start to put in passing tones. So maybe he would go like for a second, and he would then sneak it into a resolution that was smooth. And he did that. I don't know why he did that, but I would suppose that he did that because he was hearing harmonies and hearing things that weren't generally accepted. Like there was one interval in music. It's called a tritone. It sounds like this. Hear that sound? They would call that music of the devil. They would say, you can't do that. It's yeah. And you weren't allowed to have those kind of intervals like in church music. And it's really because it was really because it was hard for a singer to resolve their voice. It's a hard note to or it's hard for them to do. But he would sneak those kind of intervals in. And what happened then as he passed, and that was Baroque, and it had gone into, like, say, the classical period. After the Baroque period, things started opening up a little bit. And as it kept going and going and going, people would take the same harmonic concepts and they would make the chords like, say, like things like that, more and more adventurous, because the world was willing to accept those sounds.
Interesting.
You needed those sounds. If you're scoring a movie, and an axe murderer is walking into the house, you don't want to have that's too friendly of an axe murderer, right? So, right. I mean, but back in Bach's time, they didn't have movies, but everything was very straight. But now, today, you'd have you'd have something scary like that, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that was in the times when music was really considered a strict art form. You'd be thrown out. They would think like you had some kind of illness and probably like put you in the town and make you bleed to death. It's something crazy. It was right. I mean, you think about it. So the reason why I bring all that up is because it's the same parallel, I believe, in what you do in the visual arts and words. Back then, things had to be a certain way, but the more people started just expressing themselves and that expressivity was embraced,
yes,
that's where you get a lot more avant-garde pieces. And
artists are obviously inspired to create based on the time in which they live.
Yeah.
But also, in taking jumps and leaps as an artist, personal artist, it could push people back, and people then have to make a decision like, okay, where's my relationship to this piece of art or creativity? And so I think like artists and musicians and creative writers and everybody in the arts, we really, I believe, do have the power to make a cultural change in any era. And I know the era that I always refer to most is the 60s, because I always feel like I was a little, my life was anachronistic. I should have been living in the 60s and whatnot.
You know what? Me too. Me too. Some of those tunes were real. The psychedelic stuff was cool.
I know. And then, once everything just collapsed in terms of that counterculture. So since then, it's been like just one climb after another to try to get back to some kind of openness with creativity and the arts. But I do believe moving forward that maybe we can make, some kind of difference. But there is, just like I guess in Bach's time or in all these different time periods, there's a pushback from society.
There always is. There always is. But I think a lot of it has to do with the system that we're locked into. Like, again, if you go back to the school system, they are locked into taking this subject, taking that subject, and there's no easy way. And I think what they have to do is find an easier way to present these subjects, not with like a number grade, but like with like a pass or fail. Not even pass or fail. Like, in other words, if somebody comes in and they say, I wrote a new song and here's how it goes, and they start singing over that, right? Okay, that's good. You express yourself. It's great. If someone else comes in and plays a really notey thing, okay, you expressed yourself, you did something great. But I can't see making one guy who played a lot of notes and something maybe technically more correct get a higher quote unquote grade than
Yeah,
the other person. You can't grade art that way. I
right.
think it's more, it should just be something that you let people do as a creative outlet to get them through all the other things that they need to know and survive with. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, like I said, that takes the back seat to a lot of other things that are considered more important.
I know. And what kills me is they make time for standardized testing. So if they make
Right.
hours and hours of time per week, per month to make for that. I mean, when I was in college, they had a nice program. I had a double major and they had a nice program. And, I mean, anybody in art school will experience something similar where, you go to class for 3 hours and you just paint. You know what I mean? And it's just, you
Yeah.
get your one
Yeah.
break and you hang out and then you go back and it's nice and
Yeah.
silent and you just do your work. And then,
Yeah.
there's a point that everyone shares their work and you discuss it. And so there's this learning that's going on that's so personal and deep. I was also an English major. So then I would have the energy, even though I was taking a dual major, I would then have the energy to read my long books for English
Yeah.
class or, whatever.
Right.
And there's that sense of balance,
Right.
I would venture to say that a lot of those kids would do better in their academic subjects
I agree.
if
I
they
agree.
had the opportunity to pursue that creative edge of theirs.
I agree 100%. And how do you change that
I
though? That's the
know.
challenge.
It's changing cultural perspective because
Yeah.
people don't believe that these things are valuable.
Yeah. They don't.
And
That's the thing.
I think that again, the pandemic could not have shown us better. I mean, listen, we all lived through it. It's not like anybody could say it didn't affect them. And all I
No.
kept seeing was that everybody was getting creative.
Right.
So there's this sense that was healing. And so why shouldn't, as a society, we embrace that more?
I'm with you. You're preaching to the choir here. I'm with you. You wonder.
If you know how to allow that creative flow to work through you, you can just connect to that in a number of creative ways.
Yeah. What's the constant is the creative spark and the idea that you want to get a certain message across.
Right.
If I play a song live or if I go into a studio and I play the parts one-on-one, and so they're only being played one at a time, say like a synth bass and then a synth horn and then piano and all that. Either way, I'm still playing it. I'm still getting the same idea out. It's just I might channel it a different way.
Exactly.
The end result is if I'm happy with what I did, I say, well, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And if I'm not, I say, well, that kind of sucked. That's how it is with me. It's, it's no big up or down. It's just, well, I kind of like that, or I kind of didn't like it,
You have to direct yourself, you know what I mean? And that's the other thing.
Yeah.
I think that to master skills more and more, it's a matter of, being disciplined.
Yeah, I agree.
In some way every day, committing to chipping a little more at it so that you get a little further along, with your skill development in anything you do.
That's what ties in with the students, with the message that I try to give to the students is I try not to set them up for false expectations. But I love for them to practice 2 hours a day. Sure, if they had the time and they had the energy. But what's key is that I don't want them just endlessly playing something and like looking at their phone, like, just something like crazy like that they're not even paying attention.
Right.
And saying, well, yeah, I was, looking at my phone, talking at my friend, and I'm doing, I don't want that. I would rather have 20 minutes or half hour of where they just put everything to the side and they just give me that time. That's more productive than putting in hours and hours of just going through the motions.
It's interesting that you bring that up in terms of, time allotments, because there's this study that talks about, music is so healing and almost therapeutic in many ways. And so some therapists are like, oh, well, maybe we should take that a little bit more seriously and consider it like a real course of action towards therapy. But what does that mean? Like when you break everything down into a valid scientific approach in therapies or anything, they usually break it down to like a dose response. So after doing this study, they figured out that maybe like at least 15 minutes daily is the thing that is all one would need for an arts engagement in order to have like a sense of, well-being and balance. And
I think that in very general terms, you can tell somebody's almost any subject matter for 15, 20 minutes, even if they're not totally interested or engaged, they'll pay attention. But I think after that, it starts to fall flat unless they're super, like, I know I could sit there with Jack for 2 hours and teach him, and he won't get tired. He'll be like, he'll invite me over for dinner to stay all night.
Yeah, right? He's getting really good with that. But when he started, it was the other way too. Like now he'll go for an hour and a half, you know what I mean? On his own.
But it's he's the benefit. That's why he practiced.
Right.
He learned how to play. He learned how to read. He did it the right pace.
Right.
And he was able to build up to the point where he could tolerate some of the things in music are very repetitious, and you have to be able to sit there and tolerate that.
Right.
But again, it's more of an understanding of it. Once you start, I'll take a scale. Say you play this C scale. So you play it nice and smooth. Once you have it where you understand the fingering and understand why the thumb has to come under and why all this, you don't really need to sit there for 3 hours and do that. You more have to be able to sit there and just try to understand where to apply that to something else. So I'd rather see somebody take a lot of these small concepts and learn how to apply them. And then the actual practice, if now the person is playing music, not just scales and exercises for 2 hours a day, they're indirectly playing all that stuff for 2 hours a day, but they're using it as an application.
Right.
It's the same type of thing. If you give somebody 15 minutes of music therapy and you find that it puts them in a calm, relaxed state and they latch onto that, and then you try 20 minutes and they still kind of like it, then after 25 minutes, you see them starting to like get a little bored with it and you push back, you could eventually work up and maybe find different types of music or different types of sounds that they like. But you don't go any further than when it starts to really look like it's becoming boring or a distraction. I think it's diminishing returns.
Right.
I really do.
In New Rochelle High School, they had an amazing art program where each room was dedicated to a different art form. So whether it be drafting, they have their own drafting tables, whether it be, woodworking, whether it be painting, it was just this unbelievable wing of opportunity. And so a lot of us were really thrilled and stimulated by that and went on to do things in the arts. And only a couple years after that, they redid that whole wing. And, the art programs were less funded.
That's sad.
It is sad. If you're going to pay one person to come to work just to do drafting, like that's your course that you're teaching, you don't need that person to come in.
Right.
Not everybody needs to do drafting. You know what I mean?
No.
So it's so sad because they cut all that down. And in the 80s and onward, that's when the whole psychiatric biomedical model came in, when they said, okay, well, there's something wrong with your brain if you think like this.
Right. Ridiculous. So ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And nobody was given labels or drugs during those days in the schools. But I kept thinking to myself, wow, we're going in a bad direction. If someone like me won't be able to get some kind of job after school, after I graduate, because everything that's available is in the sciences or the business line. IBM was the big thing. We were told as 12th graders that we had to go and get a 3-piece suit so that we would be able to at some point. I think I remember those days. Oh my God, my future is just like going to be terrible. And I was pretty much right on that. So, we went down a bad turn, but I don't know what to even say about it because it really hasn't come full circle.
I think that it's never going to come full circle. And I think the solution is very simple. The solution is that you have to have the foresight to go out and enrich yourself in what you're not getting. So like what you give Jack music lessons, you give him other lessons, I'm sure other things you do with him, because he's not going to get that or necessarily get all of that in school.
Right.
You have to take the bull by the horns and you have to be justified and confident that you're making the right choice by doing that. Right. And again, like I had said to you when you said earlier about can anybody learn an instrument. And what I was trying to kind of, I guess, get out of my brain was that you don't have to do anything super hard, super complicated, or what we consider super legit. If somebody, a lot of these songs you hear written today, they'll sound something like this, like, just something like that, right? So you say, well, it's a very simple thing. Are you really even playing the piano? And the answer is, if you're playing and something is coming out that you like, and you write a melody, or you sing, or you do nothing, the second you did that, you got rid of some negative energy because you expressed yourself somehow.
Yes.
And just giving somebody, relieving that pressure out of the pressure cooker. If it's something basic like that, anybody can learn to do anything basic like that. I mean, you don't have to be a master of music to do anything like that. It's could be counterproductive, in fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just to give people the tools to be able to do basic things that make them feel good, and allow them to express a mood that they're feeling, even to themselves, even if they never play in front of somebody. Just when they're sitting, if they're feeling melancholy, or if they're feeling happy, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And they express themselves somehow. It's very doable. I think it's very doable.
In terms of getting something out, expressing yourself, keeping a journal, working through a mood with it, you might just write down 5 sentences at night and just say, oh, okay, like I got that out. Whatever was bothering me. The next day, it's less of an impact on you. And these are just basic mental health strategies.
But maybe that's all it needs. You see, that's the whole thing.
Yes.
Is there's this misconception. Look, what's the shortest love story ever written was 3 words. I love you.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it became a novel. It became a movie. It became right. But I mean, so to getting out that one thought, I love you, I hate you, I love this. It doesn't matter. Once you get that one thought out, if it's 5 sentences and it helped you let off steam, or instead of just looking at the negative, what if it was the positive? You were really happy, you accomplished something really that you haven't been able to personally do in a while. And you say, attaboy, attaboy, Tom, or, like, shit, yeah. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You feel good about yourself. You don't have to write a novel. You don't have to write a big thing. Just get it out. And it's the same thing with music.
Right.
Play a simple piece of music. Play it just for yourself. Play it with headphones on if it's electronic, or play it in front of 10,000 people. I don't care what you do. If you did something and it made you feel better, or you got some sort of an emotion out, you accomplished something, I feel.
Oh, definitely.
Musicians are not just musicians, they're people. And so just like, or I should say artists, like you're an artist, but you're not just an artist. Every problem that you solve is based on solving it the way an artist would solve it. You don't just sit there. It's not black and white for you. Sometimes you want to see the distinctions, or you want to think of the possibilities, or you just recognize something that's just not right, and you're just not going to buy into it.
Right.
And I think that the kids are a lot smarter than people take them for. They see all this.
Yes. One of the things that is ignored in our society, and especially in the education system, are these different kinds of personalities.
Right.
They don't really count the qualities inside of a creative personality type as being significant or viable for a healthy society.
Yeah.
It's just looked at as potentially problematic. Like one thing I've noticed, it is a shame. And one thing I've noticed is that, for instance, somebody who is considered ADHD, they tend to often have the ability to hyper focus on certain things. Right. And that, sometimes it works with the arts and sometimes it doesn't. But I will say that, they were thinking about labeling him. And I'm thinking to myself, first of all, he does fine in school, like high 80s and low 90s. And I'm thinking, like, why, firstly? And then they would say things like, oh, he's looking outside the window during class. And I'm thinking, okay, you know what? That's because he wants to go back to the piano. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
or did they ever think that the teacher is so friggin' boring? The way the teacher, maybe the teacher talks like this, very monotone, and Jack's like, probably Jack, he won't buy into that. Jack will be like, probably saying to himself, this guy's just as bored with the shit he's telling me as I am, like.
I know. And it was actually before he was able to get out of his seat and go into different classrooms in middle school. So it was before that. And the funny thing is, the way the philosophies work today, and again, you know how I feel about all this nonsense, but basically they want to catch it early. This is the thing. You got to catch this stuff early and treat it. And the only thing that they treat things with is drugs.
Drugs. Yeah, exactly.
And I'm thinking, why are you making everybody a drug addict? I mean, it's just...
Because they want everybody to just be fit a certain mold so that they can shove you all around.
Right.
We're not going to take it.
That's right.
We're not going to take it. We're not going to take it. We're not going to take it. I mean, that's it. I'm not going to sit there and have anybody tell me anything that I can't do. I couldn't operate like that.
The people whoever's creative out there, don't give up your spirit and don't give
up your spirit. Don't give up your hope. Well, because the thing is that everybody has a different filter with the way they learn things and the way they process things. And it's unfair to think that everybody is going to react or accept things just the way they are. Some people look at things differently.
I always point to the 60s because I feel like that was a good example of how art and music and writing in particular, all of the people who were putting had output in that era artistically, whether it be whatever, Jack Kerouac, I think he was in the 50s, but even still, like, the Beatles, The Doors, everybody who was putting things out, Warhol, all these people who were contributing to that time period of, decade and a half or so, they had a message and they were able to move society past, all of the stuckness.
They also weren't suppressed. They had a free voice.
Exactly.
They had a free voice.
And I feel like after that time period, because there was such an uprising in we want something different, for our future, there was a backlash, that happens. And it was unfortunate because it never changed. It never went backwards. There was never a pendulum swing where it balanced again.
Yeah. Well,
maybe it'll change.
It has to do, I think, one word, money.
Yes.
For instance, in the music business, when record companies get involved, and now it's all about publishing and it's all about appealing to a certain person, and it's all about they can now produce an artist to appeal to a certain type of people, and it's all controlling. It's just not like it's tough.
Yeah,
it's a tough thing.
It's tough.
Same thing in art, right? I mean, if you put out art that was just in your head, they would censor 3/4 of it. They'd say, you can't do that.
Right.
Well, why can't I? Well, because they'll tell you because nobody will buy it. And you say, well, who gives a fuck if they buy it? Excuse my language, but I'm saying, who cares? Who cares if they buy it? That's what I wanted to say or wanted to do. Maybe you don't sell that piece on mainstream, but again, it's all about control and controlling big numbers.
Yes.
Big numbers. Like today, luckily the artists that I work with they're not driven like in that way. But, if you get a song on YouTube, you have to have I forget how many million hits on YouTube just to make a couple of $1,000s. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right. So really the artist now in terms of music is very confused. And what they don't really realize is that the only way you make good money as most artists are by directly doing it. Like if you play a performance and you get paid $300, you made $300.
Mm-hmm.
If you paint a picture and you sell 10 of them, you made $500, right? But if you have a YouTube channel and 500,000 people download your video content, you hardly make anything.
Yeah.
Right. So as an artist, you still have to work somehow and do that. And they don't get that. People are aiming for this big piece of pie, and they don't realize when you go for this big thing, you're just going to be controlled and stretched about, and you're not going to have any of the freedom you want.
It's true. It's true. When you do it for others, it becomes something that's not genuine. It's not coming from the heart.
It's not you.
It's not you. It's not you. But that's the interesting part. I think if we cultivated more of that creative spirit in people, they can figure out a way to express themselves in a healthy way and be good, be honest, and stay authentic. And those are qualities that a person needs in order to maintain any kind of mental health.
Yeah.
So personally, I feel that one of the problems with this society is not honoring those areas of, that's something that we need in our gut.
We need that. We need that heavily.
We need that.
People have to have ways of expressing themselves positively and negatively. But either way, if you're having a shitty day, you should be able to do it. You shouldn't fear that if you draw like a picture of like a monster, that somebody's going to say, "Oh, there's got to be something wrong with you." You drew a picture
this
of
is
a monster.
what they do.
Yeah. I drew a picture of a monster because the teacher's a fucking monster. That's why I did that. So your mother may get mad at you for a minute, but at least now you got that thought out. You said, "Well, all right, so the hell with the teacher now. Now I can go back to doing what I'm doing." But if you keep that bottled up, how could you stop people from doing that? You can't.
No. These things are important in life.
The flip side is that if you're in a really good mood and you just you paint like just a sun over a sunset coming down, and you took all night to do it, and your mom says to you as you're a kid, "Well, there must be something wrong with you because like you must have been spacing out. Like, why did you just paint a sunset?" And you say, "Well, Ma, I was so happy because everything went well at school today. I got, all my marks. Everybody was nice. And I just saw that beautiful sunset out of my window and I painted that." Well, I mean, because it could allow a nice positive thought. It could put the kid in like a nice or adult in a nice positive mind too. Right. The art is not necessarily at all just escaping negative. It's accentuating positive.
Absolutely.
And it's putting you in a good frame of mind so that maybe the next day you get up, you'll have a better attitude towards things you don't want to have to do. Right. Like your history homework to get through school. You say, "Well, yeah, that homework is a pain in the ass, but I drew that nice picture. I felt good that I was able to just like relax a little and kick back. And now tomorrow I feel like I'm going to really charge." You have to give people an outlet, a creative outlet either way.
Absolutely.
And that's why I said to you about learning the instrument. Again, if somebody's just playing, like anybody could learn how to play just about anything. If they want to just play basic stuff and it makes you feel good or it helps you cope with the bad, I think it's an objective. It's a good objective to have.
Yes.
And it's doable.
Yes, absolutely. So Tom, what are you involved in right now? Are you promoting anything? You have any gigs or any albums or anything?
I have nothing right now. I have a couple of things that we finished in the studio, but because it's copywritten and publishing and everything, I can't release anything right now. Soon, I'll give you maybe an update.
Well, you have any ditties you want to play for us?
I could play a tune. What I had intended to do was use the vibe of our conversation and all the things we talked about it as it runs through my head. And I love to improvise. I figured I'd improvise a little thing as a goodbye to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I have my little tripod set up on the camera here, and I'll play us out. How's that?
Sounds great.
This is based on us. Good talking to you.
You're awesome. That was so beautiful.
Glad you liked it.
Thank you so much, Tom. You're the best.
Okay, Jen.
Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.